And now, today's featured speakers, backed by popular demand, are Bentley professors Jeff Gulati and Dan Merica, class of 2010. Jeff is a professor of political science in the Global Studies Department at Bentley University. He earned a PhD in government from the University of Virginia and BA in political science from UNC Chapel Hill. His primary research interests are in political campaigns, digital campaigning strategies, the U.S. Congress, and congressional elections. Professor Gulati is a member of the Executive Council of Pi Sigma Alpha, the National Political Science Honor Society, a member of the senior editorial boards of the Journal of Information Technology and Politics and the Journal of Political Marketing. Dan is a CNN political reporter based in Washington, D.C., covering the Democratic presidential primary and 2020 election. He joined CNN in 2011 and has covered President Trump's first year in office, the 2018 midterm elections, Hillary Clinton's 2016 campaign, and more. Dan is a proud Nevadan and graduated from Bentley with a degree in global studies, followed by a master's degree in journalism and public affairs from American University. Without further ado, please join me in virtually welcoming Professor Jeff Gulati and CNN reporter Dan Merica.
Thank you very much. Backed by popular demand, man.
That's right. Good to see you again, Dan, as always.
Yes, good to see you.
Well, welcome everyone. I want to start off by giving you a kind of a lay of the land. I know a lot of you, if you're here, you're probably following this presidential election very closely. And just want to kind of set things up by showing you where in the polls, where our two candidates, Joe Biden, the Democratic nominee, and Donald Trump, the Republican nominee, our incumbent president, where they are relative to each other. And one of the interesting things about this graph, so first of all, one interesting thing, of course, is to see a pretty substantial lead by Joe Biden. But the other thing to note is just how stable this race has been, with so many very significant events occurring throughout the spring and summer. If you go back to around June, middle of June, we have seen this race to be about between a 6 and an 8 point race, and so very little has changed. Now I know some of you are thinking, all right, well, what about the Electoral College? You know, Hillary Clinton won the popular vote by over 2 percentage points last time. Not to mention she was leading in the polls throughout the fall. What about the Electoral College? So Carmen, do you mind showing us the map of where things stand in the different states? So, you know, as you all know, we elect our presidents through an electoral college, and I hope we're going to get lots of questions about what all that means in different scenarios. But I actually have difficulty with colors. My wife had to help me with all of this. Now I'm going to do it by memory. But one thing that I can see, that light blue up in Michigan and Wisconsin, and actually it changed since last night. But anyway, it was Pennsylvania was light blue as well. If you add up all of those states, if you can bring it down just a little bit, Carmen, they'll be able to show you the map or the numbers there. Where Joe Biden, well, yesterday when I was preparing for this, Joe Biden was over 270 electoral votes. But you can see, if I got my color scheme right, Arizona, Pennsylvania, Florida, Georgia, North Carolina. I can't actually tell the color. I'm told they're brown. And those are all toss-up states, all states that Donald Trump won last time around. And then I think Texas, Iowa, and Ohio are a light red. So Biden is in a good spot right now. He's up high in the polls. He's doing well in a number of states that matter. And I'm hoping that we'll get some questions about polling and all of that. Oh, somebody's telling me Texas is brown. So it was red. It was a light red last night.
Yeah, Jeff, Texas, the brown states are Arizona, Texas, Iowa, Ohio, Pennsylvania, North Carolina, Georgia, Florida, New Hampshire, and Maine's 2nd Congressional District.
Okay, I guess right on most of them. Yeah, like I said, it changed, and I'm going with what my wife told me, and I don't remember it all. Bottom line is, Joe Biden is ahead. He's doing well in states that Hillary Clinton lost, and many states that are toss-ups are the ones that Donald Trump won. So what we want to, I kind of want to start things out with, what's left that could change this race, and two major events. One that has just happened is the death of Ruth Bader Ginsburg, and we may have a battle for Supreme Court nomination coming up. And then we have a presidential debate on Tuesday night that I hope all of you will tune into. So my question I'll start off with a question to Dan. You have been to many debates. You've seen both of these candidates debate in person. What's it going to be like? If you could just tell us, tell first the audience how this debate format is going to be different than past debates, and what that might mean for the way that the candidates present themselves and talk to each other.
I mean, it's basically a TV show at this point. You saw actually the last Democratic primary debate, which was between Bernie Sanders and Joe Biden. It was in a TV studio, actually our TV studio here in DC. And it was just a debate on a soundstage. There's no audience. There's nothing like that. Now, there will be a debate later in this process where there will be a town hall style debate where people ask, real quote unquote real people ask questions to the candidates. But this one will be different. This will be just the two of them up there. I think it changes the tenor and the feel of the debate. I mean, think about Donald Trump. Most of his events are kind of raucous, big affairs. He's in front of a crowd of thousands. They chant, they scream. They know kind of the ebbs and flows of his speech. So if you go to a Trump rally, it's almost like going to a concert in some ways, because they know when a song starts that this is where the song ends. And there's kind of there's an ebb and flow to the event, and the crowd knows that. That's not going to be the case at this first debate or the third debate. So I think for the president, it's a bit of a moment where he's going to have to fire himself up because he won't have the crowd to do that for him. And for Vice President Biden, I think he's more used to this format, frankly. I mean, he's done a lot of debates in his past. Obviously, the president has done them too in 2016. But this is going to be a much more timid affair, I believe, based on past presidential debates, because there won't be that many people. It'll be basically three people. I mean, there'll be more people in the room, but it'll be three primary people in the debate: the moderator and the two candidates.
Okay. Just to kind of throw in some the past debates, and I hope again questions about the impact of debates are. Of course, the most famous one being in a 1960 debate with John F. Kennedy and Richard Nixon. And I don't think there's any doubt that without TV debates, or the first TV debate, that John Kennedy wouldn't have been elected president. But there's very few other debates that really have mattered over time.
I mean, look at 2016, for example. I think that the reaction to all three presidential debates in 2016 was that Hillary Clinton did pretty well, and in large part defeated defeated Donald Trump in these debates, and she went on to lose the presidency. Now, you can say she lost the presidency for a number of different reasons, and maybe it wasn't the debate, but there are certainly Democrats, and I would say Democrats inside the Biden campaign, who believe that these debates are less important than they have been in past cycles, in large part because you saw on the polling map, look at how steady the race has been for the last 5 months. Very little has changed and moved that trajectory up and down. And it's been a really chaotic few months. Everything from the coronavirus to racial unrest. Now you have the death of Ruth Bader Ginsburg. So it's hard to imagine for a lot of Democrats that the debates will really shift the calculation that a lot of Americans are making and who they vote for. And the other thing is that only a certain, there are millions of people who will watch these debates. But the biggest thing is how they consume it afterwards, it seems. how the clips and how the commentary is consumed afterwards. And I think that's where you'll really see if this debate matters or not. It's hard for a lot of Democrats to believe that it's going to shift the balance of this race.
Yeah, and I think it may help. It definitely reinforces people's views. It may not change views, but it makes people feel better about the choices that they've already made, and it may help get them more enthusiastic. I think that matters more for Joe Biden. There's still a little bit of softness in his support. It's more anti-Trump than it is pro-Biden. And so to kind of get Democrats excited and really feel good, but I would say that's another challenge for Biden, is to really give a positive message, a reason to vote for him, not just a reason to vote against President Trump.
So we actually have a question about debates. Aren't these debates important because the American people want to see if Joe Biden has the cognitive ability to debate important issues without a teleprompter? Isn't that the biggest risk factor of this campaign, to his campaign during these debates? I mean, I think that both candidates need to show that they can handle themselves on the debate stage. But what you've seen actually from the Trump campaign, it's been very funny. Donald Trump likes to get on stage and rails against the vice president, often says that he's taking performance-enhancing drugs to make himself better at debates. He does a lot of these things where he's lowering the bar for the vice president, where if the vice president comes out and just gives a solid coherent performance, that he's seen as he's done well. But the president's campaign has tried to raise the bar on Biden's debating abilities, saying that he's been he's been in front of the camera for 47 years. He's been a public official for 47 years. He's debated many times. All things that are true. But you have this kind of push and pull of the Trump campaign, where the president at his rallies and whatnot is certainly lowering the bar on the vice president, and then you have the campaign is actually trying to raise the bar.
Yeah, it's a really funny thing, because that's what most candidates to their opponents, they want to really raise the bar. That this is I remember George Bush. I'm not an Oxford debater like Bill Clinton, and woe is me. This is going to be really tough. I am the incumbent president of the United States, but it's going to be a tough thing for me. I don't expect much.
He was a Yale debater, I believe. Right?
Exactly, not Oxford, and so a little different. And so that's what you normally try to do.
Yeah.
And I would guess I know a lot of Republicans and Trump supporters. That's what they're hoping for Biden. But if you look at his past, if you can stomach going, if you don't like Joe Biden, you probably don't want to go to his past debates. But you can go watch him on C-SPAN against Paul Ryan, against Sarah Palin, and he looked fine. And the truth is, you don't need to look great. You just need to make people who are already supporting you happy about their choice.
I had a Democratic operative tell me actually today that Joe Biden wasn't the best debater in the primary. That if you wanted a really good debater in the Democratic primary, there were probably people on that stage who were more qualified, better debaters for sure. And I think the Biden campaign would admit that. But this operative said, if debating was critical to winning the election, Joe Biden wouldn't be the nominee. And that kind of encapsulates where people see this debate in level of importance. If your family is dealing with the coronavirus head on, is it really going to change your opinion of this race if one or the other has a really good debate? Or if you're a big time Trump supporter and Biden has a great debate, is it really going to change the way you feel about the president? It's hard to kind of imagine that scenario playing out.
Yeah, and I also try to remind my students, so I will show them clips from past debates, and they'll be very impressed with John F. Kennedy's performance in 1960. And he did win, but he won 48% of the vote. And Bill Clinton's performance in 1992, just incredible in the town hall debate. And that's the one with George W. Bush was looking at his watch during the debate. And he wins 43% of the vote. So it's almost, again, it really reinforces people's
not to belabor this point, but you think about the two things we just brought up about the winning debates. The main reason a lot of people thought Kennedy won the debate on TV was because Nixon looked kind of sickly. He was sweating. He just didn't look great. And then we remember the moment where he looked at the watch. Those are both theatrical moments. Those are both the way that they present themselves in the moments, not necessarily rhetorical moments. So a lot of the way that people consume these debates and the things that are remembered for a long time to come are the theatrics of the moment, are the way that they present themselves physically, and less so. I mean, 2016, one of the most memorable things of the debate was Donald Trump looming over Hillary Clinton as she answered some of these questions in the town hall format. So I think those things really resonate with people. And so it'll be interesting to see what happens during these debates and what is remembered theatrically as well. I think we have more questions as well.
I said said not to belabor it, but hey, I just remember something else. 1984. Those of you are old enough to remember the first Reagan-Mondale debate, and Reagan looked terrible in that first debate, and there was concerns about his age. He was most likely going to win, but that was the one area of hope for the Democrats and Walter Mondale, is that you kind of bring up the age issue. But did that change anybody's support for Ronald Reagan? And then the second thing was that in the next debate, of course, Reagan rebounded and everyone was happy. So that would be another thing to point out. Even if somebody has a bad debate, the debate is early, and usually whatever bump happens because of someone doing well, that will tend to dissipate after a week. And we have 2 more debates, and the candidates have made sure that no debates are going to be so close to the election that no one can recover. From,
you want to go one of the questions?
Yeah, why don't you take that one, Dan, about Wall Street?
Oh man, I the answer is I don't totally know. I think it's hard to predict what Wall Street how they'll respond to the presidential election. Donald Trump has certainly overseen a very large bump in the stock market, something he reminds his voters of often. There are a lot of voters, mostly Democratic voters, who will say, I don't own stocks. The stock market bump doesn't necessarily help me. Maybe I have a 401k, but it's not, they would say it's not a representation of how the economy is doing. The answer is I don't know. And I wouldn't want to predict how the stock market or how Wall Street is going to respond to the presidential election.
And we'll get some clues to that as we get closer to the election. We'll see if there's any changes in different markets. But what I would really, sort of as a guess, as a non-economist, is that certain industries will be very happy with a change in administration, and others won't. And so many of the tech companies, even though they're kind of under fire from everybody right now, but financial services and tech companies, kind of the new economy, knowledge economy, and agriculture and industrial sectors will be a little disappointed. But I think in the long run, you don't really see much of a difference on who's elected. It shouldn't be that big a deal.
I'll let you take the next question because I know it's your favorite topic. If Trump wins the Electoral College and Biden wins the popular vote, do you think that will push for a change to the Electoral College? What would that entail?
So it'll be, yes, there'll be a push to do that from the side that, well, in this case, you're saying it would be Biden's side, so the Democrat side, and that's not going to happen. It's not going to be successful. It's a very difficult thing to change the Constitution. You need 2/3 of the House and the Senate to vote for that. And the bottom line is that the members of Congress from rural states, small states, will be very reluctant to give up a little bit of power. As of right now, the Democrats tend to win in more smaller states than the Republicans, and so they have a little bit more of an advantage than the Democrats do. So, we talk about this every cycle. I think what would maybe take to maybe abolish the Electoral College might be if you had the other scenario. If you had a Trump win, a Republican win, and a Democrat win in the Electoral College. Whenever we've had this kind of result, it's been the Democrat that's on the losing side. And so I think you'd have to see it where both sides really see this is not the best way to elect a president. And that would be really the only way to change it. But then there's still that rural and small state dynamic that will prevent that.
I mean, to just put a finer point on it, Congress in the middle of a pandemic can't even agree to provide more stimulus to the economy right now, it's very, very hard to foresee a time when Congress would agree to the majorities needed to change the Constitution to abolish the Electoral College. I can't foresee that ever happening. I think Jeff is right. If the shoe was on the other foot, there'd be more political will. But the odds that that would ever happen are so low because Democrats run up the score with the popular vote so much in big cities like New York, LA, et cetera.
That's right. And then remember, if it did get through it, it would need 3/4 of the
Yes.
states. And I think that's where you really see the opposition. And then you get states like Delaware and Rhode Island, Hawaii, who really benefit from this as well, would be a little bit worried about it.
So go ahead.
Let me just mention, don't forget though, the Democrats have some other options, and I'm not saying they're doing it because of political reasons, but it may be the right thing to do. Is statehood for the District of Columbia and Puerto Rico, and I think it's pretty clear that that would lead to DC's already represented in the Electoral College, but would yield 2 Democratic senators and then at least 1 out of Puerto Rico. You want to do the next one, Dan, about the
Sure. This would be, what are the hot topics the debates will hopefully cover that actually help undecided voters decide on Biden and Trump? I actually pulled this up because the first debates topics have been announced. So it's going to be in 15-minute chunks, and here are the 6 topics: the Trump-Biden records, the Supreme Court, COVID-19, the economy, race and violence in our cities, and the integrity of the election. So that'll be a 90-minute debate in those 6 chunks. And I also think, and the planners of this debate admit this, it'll change based on news of day and topics that crop up maybe days before the debate. But those are issues that are on the minds of every voter, frankly. I mean, if the coronavirus, for example, has been by far the most important issue in this campaign. If you look at polling, if you look at what voters are telling reporters like myself, the coronavirus comes up regularly. I was just in Michigan, and you talk a lot about the economy there and trade policy and how NAFTA and now the USMCA, how that impacts auto jobs and union jobs there. So I think those are issues that are certainly on the minds of voters. And I wouldn't be surprised, both of these candidates are able to take a topic and turn it to talk about something that they want to talk about. For example, Donald Trump, when he talks about the coronavirus, is probably also going to talk about China and blaming China for the virus. So there's an ability for all of these conversations to pivot to other topics as well.
So one thing I'm really looking at when you gave us that list of issues is about the economy. I've heard what the 2 candidates have to say about many of those issues, but for Biden, I still don't know what he and the Democrats, what they're really saying about the economy, and you were just in Michigan, and I'm wondering from your conversations with you said these are Obama to Trump voters. So the Democrats, I think, have a lot of programs that they support that are very popular, on healthcare, on helping people in need in this particular time. But sort of this overall vision for how to make the economy stronger, to grow the economy, to increase jobs. I don't see a message there. And do you think voters see something, or are they worried as well?
So I think I went to Monroe County, Michigan, which is about 40 minutes south of Detroit. It's right on the border with Ohio. It has a long history of being not only a Democratic stronghold, but also a place with a very high proportion of union jobs. Barack Obama won the county in 2008 and then in 2012, and then the county was won by Donald Trump by 23% in 2016, representing one of the biggest swings in the nation. So I went down there and talked to a lot of union voters. You'll certainly hear from people who are union voters who voted for the president in 2016 and now regret that vote, thinking that he was going to do a lot of the stuff that he promised on trade and the economy that they don't think he's fully delivered on, frankly. But it's a hugely Trump-supporting county, and you drive around there, you talk to Republicans there. I talked to a state rep from there who was actually elected the same year, a Republican state rep who was elected the same year that Trump was elected. And he admits, he said, I could have never had this job in years prior to Trump because this was such a Democratic county. But every single voter you talk to talks about the economy, especially in a place like this that relied on manufacturing jobs, relied on auto plants. There used to be a very large Ford facility on the river there that closed down in 2007, 2008, lost thousands of jobs for the county. So the physical scars of trade policy are visible in this community, and that's why the economy is really important to them. But when you talk to people about the economy and about Joe Biden, they'll say that they trust Biden. Not necessarily that they think his economic policies, the X, Y, and Z policy he's proposed is great, but they will say that they trust that he understands where they're coming from and what they want in life. And, he has this plan to, it's called Build Back Better is his economic plan. He has a plan to revitalize manufacturing, $700 billion, I believe it is. And he started to use this kind of populist messaging about the election being Scranton versus Park Avenue representing Donald Trump, Scranton being where Biden was born. And that works, I think, with a lot of voters. Excuse me, that works with voters. It's not necessarily as much about policy, and it's more about the feel that people get when they think of a certain candidate. And I think, Democrats in Monroe County admit they don't think that Joe Biden can win a county that Donald Trump won by 23% 4 years ago. But to win a state like Michigan, which is going to be critical, it's all about margins. So if he can cut that down to 10%, 12%, he has a pretty good chance of winning the state of Michigan.
Okay. Yeah, so it seems like it's going to be one candidate trying to show that they care. You can trust me. I won't forget about you. Well, the other one saying, I'm fighting for you. And, I'm going back for you. I'm your voice, as he said last time. So
Yeah.
I'll try to take a stab at the one on mail-in ballots. And,
go for it.
Well, the easy answer and the true answer is I don't know. And the reason is because I don't think we've ever seen anything as like this. And so I don't know how many states are ready to handle this. The new problems that come up, we just saw one in Pennsylvania called the Naked Ballot. And so you have to put your ballot in two envelopes. There's a secrecy envelope, which you then seal, and then you put that into I don't know what the next envelope is called, but that's where you sign your name.
Yeah.
And so one allows you to be anonymous, and the other one allows the state to check you off as having voted. So, but what I can say about that is, as you already all know, is that there are going to be many more people that are voting by mail. Democrats are more interested in voting by mail. Many of them are in urban areas where they're consolidating polling places. So they're tending to rely on that. And then I think the thing to watch out for is, when are these ballots going to be coming in, and when do they start getting counted? And then how do where does this all stand on election day before all of that is completed? And so I would point you all to the state of Florida, is to really pay attention there. Florida is allowed to start counting the ballots, I think 2 or 3 weeks before the election is over, and all the ballots have to be counted, or I'm sorry, only the ballots that arrive by election day get counted. So if Biden wins Florida on election night, if Biden wins Florida, he's won this election. If he wins Florida, he's won those 3 Midwestern states, and probably.
It's hard to see an electoral map for Trump that leads him to a win that does not include Florida. Frankly, that's the same for Ohio as well. I think if Joe Biden somehow wins Ohio, a lot of Democrats a year ago thought that was not a chance. Ohio and Florida, you may know on election night who won those, and it's hard to see a way that Trump wins without those 2 states.
North Carolina is another state. They are allowed to. They have 3 days to count their ballots, but they have to arrive by election day.
Yeah.
They've already started counting them, so we might get again. So even if Trump wins North Carolina and Florida, it's by how much? If he's tied, if that's a 1-point victory, then probably Biden's won those other states. But we got to wait. So let's get to your question specifically about Wisconsin, and I'll add Pennsylvania and Michigan to those. They can't start counting until election day. And so if we do have some doubt, we really have to wait for those states. And I'm not sure, unless you know, do you know, Dan, I don't know if they're allowed to accept, I think that might be a battle that they're having, how many days after the election they're allowed, if it's postmarked on election day.
Yeah, I don't know for sure where those 3 states are. I think one of the states, I believe it was Michigan actually, just allowed for votes to be counted 1 day prior, which is a change. But I don't know how long like the postmarked issue is going to be. And that's something that Democrats, I mean, there's tons of litigation going on right now over this election. And that's one of the big topics is how, if you drop your ballot in the mail the day before the election, but it doesn't get there until 2 days after, can that vote be counted? Okay, the next question is, how do you think fact checking should be addressed during the debate? So I actually know that the commission has basically said it is not on the role of the moderator to be a fact checker, someone who's fact checking either the president or Vice President Biden. It is going to be more on the role of Vice President Biden to fact check Donald Trump and Donald Trump to fact check Joe Biden. I think there is a fear, or I think a lot of Democrats do not want to see Joe Biden to get into a fact-checking match with President Trump. They would rather have him just make his case. And I think that's what you're going to probably see. I would imagine there's a world in which Joe Biden, addresses President Trump, maybe making a falsehood early on in the debate to kind of set the barrier that he's set the line, that he knows that the president has made a false statement or something like that. But I would be shocked if he lingered on it, because frankly, that's not really what voters are there to see. I mean, if you are really upset about President Trump's falsehoods, you're likely a Biden voter, and the president and Vice President Biden needs to make his case to undecided voters and to fire up Democrats. So maybe he tries it once in a while, but I don't think he's going to be responding to the president's questions with this was incorrect, this was incorrect, this was incorrect kind of thing.
I think that'd actually get him in trouble. And as you said earlier, Dan, it's theater, it's a performance, and you just kind of need to stay away from those things, not get that bogged down on that. So the next question, it says anonymous attendee, and I have a feeling this is one of my former students asking me a softball question. So is it correct that no sitting presidents ever lost re-election with an approval rating at 50% or higher? And so you could turn it around, no one that's had one below 50% has ever won. And so that's correct. Of course, with Truman, polling stopped in late September, and so it was probably at 50% on election day. George W. Bush, the week before the election in the Gallup poll, and I think the aggregated polls on Real Clear Politics had a approval rating of 49%. And because of his turnout operation, they were the electorate on election day through the exit polls was 51%. And his approval rating, and he did win. President Obama was at 53%. So Gerald Ford was the one who came closest, and he was at 48%, and he won 48% on the vote. So you can kind of see there's kind of convergence between your final vote share and your approval rating. I will have to say, for those presidents who had those lower approval ratings, like Ford, like George W. Bush, their approval ratings were way ahead of their disapproval ratings. So even Ford at 48% had disapproval ratings in the low 40s. Yeah. And so President Trump has had a disapproval rating over 50. There are other polls that say half the electorate has no intention of voting for Donald Trump. And there was another part of this question. Yeah, so in the past, we're looking at the last Gallup poll. Gallup is not the most trusted pollster anymore. And so the last couple of election cycles, we've been looking at these aggregated polls from either Real Clear Politics or 538.com.
I stand with that answer.
So let me take the next one. This is one of my former students here. So if Biden wins in November and the Dems take the Senate, about the DC statehood. So here's a couple of things. I'm going to make the question a little bit complicated. I think it's pretty clear to most of the prognosticators that the Democrats will probably win a net of 3 seats. And so we'll have a 50-50 tie. If we assume that Biden wins and Kamala Harris is there to break ties they'll have a majority. But there is some disputes, or it's not clear whether the vice president can actually participate in the organization of the Senate. So we could still have some fireworks here. In 2000, we ended up with a 50-50 tie, and the Democrats and Republicans ended up with a power sharing agreement. We had co-committee chairs in the Senate, one Democrat, one Republican, even representation, and then the vice president could vote to break any ties. So, but let's take Mike's scenario where they win a net of 4. I would be surprised if they didn't you don't need a constitutional amendment to do that. You need a majority of Congress and a presidential signature to admit new states. So there's a little bit of things they have to work out because DC is a federal territory. But I would be surprised if they didn't try to do it before the midterm elections of 2022, when it's possible they could lose there. And we could go on with your question about what do they decide to do with the filibuster, and do they try to get rid of that if they have 51 seats? I think there's some Democrats that are troubled by that. They don't want to. So I'm not sure about that.
Yeah, I think the important point here is that the death of RBG has a big role in this, because the Supreme Court justice passed away, and Mitch McConnell signaled very quickly that he was going to move on a nomination that President Trump is expected to make actually tomorrow. That has fired up Democrats, especially liberals, who want to make wholesale sweeping changes, democratic reforms, they're calling them, to the way this country operates. And that is everything from term limits to the Supreme Court are being talked about, additional justices to the Supreme Court are being talked about, and then what you mentioned also, so the DC statehood, Puerto Rican statehood are also being addressed. I think that if Mitch McConnell and Donald Trump successfully seat a Supreme Court justice, which it seems like that's the odds are in their favor at this point, I think you'll have more of a push to do some big step like that. And I can tell you, as the person sitting in DC right now, that there are a lot of my neighbors who'd be very happy about that.
Yeah, and the two things that you mentioned about Supreme Court term limits would require constitutional amendment.
Yeah.
But increasing the size of the court would not. That's an act of Congress that needs to be signed by the president. Here's a question from Doreen. Do you want to start with that, and then I can follow up with
Yeah. Is there really a chance that President Trump won't leave office if he thinks the results of the election are unfair or fraudulent, as he is perpetuating? I mean, I think you're right. He is perpetuating that. And I think that if the election is very, very close on election night, you'll certainly hear a lot of that from the president's campaign. I think part of it is rhetorical to fire up his base. I think the other part of it is that he's making voter fraud a big issue in this campaign, with considerable falsehoods that he's pushing on the issue. Do I think that he will stay in power if it's a close election? No, because I think that there will be results from states that will be certified by these states. Maybe it may take a few weeks to get those results certified, but I think there will be certified results. And as we discussed earlier, that whole argument of whether the election is close is pretty much done on election night if Joe Biden wins a Florida or an Ohio, or if he sweeps a bunch of states other than those two, and it's pretty apparent that he's won the election. So I think the whole debate happening right now about Donald Trump staying in office hinges on how close the results are on election night and what states the president is doing well in and what states the Biden campaign is doing well in. If Biden has a big lead on election night, I think it's very hard to see how that would happen.
Right, I do see a lot of litigation taking place. I think if it's, as you just said, if the poll numbers that I showed earlier, if that's really, so I know if you are a supporter of Trump, you're hoping that the polls are wrong and just a little bit closer, and you take into account the margin of error. But of course, the margin of error also means that the lead could be bigger. And so if it's a clear victory, it's just really not much that he can do, even through some lawsuits. But I think he will try that. But let's also keep this in mind that the Constitution says that his term expires on January 20th at noon or 11:59 a.m. on January 20th. Legally he's done, and so is Mike Pence as vice president. And if the Electoral College, votes for the Democrats, and then that is announced in the Congress when they convene in early January, and he doesn't want to. It doesn't matter if he doesn't want to leave. Assuming Nancy Pelosi wins re-election in her district in California, and the Democrats re-elect her as their leader, she will be the next president of the United States until this is resolved. So he will be gone by January 20th.
If he
loses, I mean, he may win. And let's not forget, this election's not over. So it's still another 6 weeks to go. And yeah, it's not over.
There's also a scenario where the president wins Florida and Ohio and North Carolina, and maybe picks off one of those states in the upper Midwest, and that also is pretty determinative as well. Okay, so we answered that question. What happens if results are contested? There's no clear winner emerges right away. 4 weeks away from the election, do you foresee any kind of major event that could change the outcome? COVID vaccine, China issues, Venezuela issues, any other? I mean, I made this point earlier. There have been a lot of big issues that have happened this year. I think everyone on this Zoom is probably pretty exhausted from following. I certainly can speak for myself and say that it's been exhausting as a reporter following all of this, because a lot has happened, and it really hasn't moved the polling that much. You look at that bar that the professor put up, it's pretty stable. And so yes, there may be issues that could happen, or things that could change, or things that could become big issues in the race, but those have had very little impact on at least the national polling. Democrats expect polling in some of these important states to tighten over the next few weeks, as they do every election year. A COVID vaccine, I think the president is signaling he's certainly going to try and make a vaccine, at least the possibility of a vaccine, an issue at the end of this campaign. He's pushing very hard to get some good news out there in late October. But it's hard to see any massive issue that really shakes up this race in any big way. Now that this is taped and something happens and this will be played back when I'm wrong.
Well, that's why you got to have an election, because you have to play it out, and things can happen, and we are all familiar with major sporting events where a team goes in as a big underdog, and we know who's going to win. And there's a major injury. There's something that could happen, or they just don't execute. The favorite team doesn't execute, and so the Biden team needs to execute. And there are some variables here that are kind of unknown, and how to deal with the large number of mail-in ballots. And it changes the way that you do get out the vote efforts and signing up new people. We only have a couple of weeks left before we can get people registered. On both sides. So there are some things that, that are at play here that could matter. But as Dan said, I mean, what could be worse or bigger than anything that's happened in this past year, or even in 2016, some of the things that happened.
So I believe that this question is an election myth, but I want to be completely sure to before I say one way or the other.
So California not count absentee ballots. I don't know. I mean, I think in many it is possible, and I've heard stories about this in all jurisdictions.
Actually, I just pulled this up.
Okay.
The Secretary of State of California says it is a myth. Provisional ballot. This is the myth. Provisional ballots are only counted if there is a close race. This is what they say. In California, provisional ballots serve as a fail-safe method of ensuring all voters who show up to the polls can cast a ballot. All eligible provisional ballots are counted. So that's the answer.
Yeah, and I follow from my research. I am looking at election results for my research projects, and I'll just be checking things month after month, and they keep changing. and all the way till February, and the clerk of the House doesn't even certify it until April or so. And so the final, and they keep, rising up, and that's the reason why. And so, they may, a candidate will concede when they know there's so many provisional ballots, and even if they're to win 60% of them, it won't change the outcome. But yeah, that's what Dan says, what I expected.
So the next question is, beyond the presidential election, what is the outlook on congressional races? I'm happy to take this one. I think that there's a sense that these congressional races will largely go by way of the presidential campaign. So if Biden has a good night, I think you could expect Democrats to pick up a few seats. And if the president wins, maybe Republicans pick up a few seats. It is very hard for operatives on either side, Democrats or Republicans, to see a scenario where the House switches from Democrats to Republicans, just because of the atmospherics of the moment and looking at all these different races. I think Democrats are going to try and build on how well they did in 2018, especially in the suburbs of some of these major metropolitan areas. That was what delivered them the House in 2018. And I think you're going to see Republicans try and pick off seats in a few places in the upper Midwest that have lost population and are growing more conservative over time. So I'm thinking of certain seats like they did in Minnesota is a good example. There are a few in California actually that are probably more suburban seats that flipped to Democrats in 2018. But it's hard to see a scenario where Republicans take back the House. I don't think operatives on either side really think that's going to happen.
Yeah, and in the Senate, I think the consensus is that so the Democrats need 3 for a tie, and that they'll lose the Alabama seat. So now they need 4. They're very likely to win Arizona and Colorado. So now they need 2 to get to that tie. And so those 2 states to watch are Maine and North Carolina. Susan Collins has won many times in Maine. She is under fire, but she's pulled it out before. North Carolina is a somewhat it's a toss-up state. I think both Republicans are behind there. So kind of on the wish list for Democrats, and I think it really is a wish list. There are a couple of seats in Georgia, and of course there's one in Texas and Alaska. Montana is another one. So the 2 that I would watch though are Iowa and then Montana. I think Iowa is the one that the Democrats have a real chance. I would call that a real toss-up. I think they'll win the other 4 that I mentioned, but I think Iowa is a toss-up. I could really go either way. That's why we call it a toss-up. But they would love to win that. I think if they had to, if you had to direct resources to one race, I would put that in Iowa. And then Montana, as Dan said, I would not put it in Kentucky. A lot of Democrats are sending money to Amy McGrath in Kentucky. They really dislike Mitch McConnell. He's not going to lose. That money could be better invested if you're a Democrat into one of these other states. And in fact, I think Amy McGrath should take some of her funds and spread it around to these candidates. She's got $41 million for a race she's not going to win.
Yeah, but you're also getting to the point in these races where you have so much money that there's not enough TV time to buy ads on. That you almost run out of eligible ad space, especially in some of these competitive swing states where there are presidential ads also being run.
As a TV guy, Dan, I know that makes you really sad.
No comment. All right, so this question, despite previous recorded statements from Republicans stating that if a Supreme Court justice passes during the last half of their last term, the next president should be able to pick the next Supreme Court justice, there seems to be statements now saying the opposite. What are the chances that a new Supreme Court justice will be picked before the election or before the end of Trump's term? It seems pretty likely that the president is going to nominate. He is going to nominate somebody tomorrow. The Republican head of the Senate has said they will take up that nomination. If they move quickly, it does seem like there's enough time to vote and approve somebody. I think Democrats will try and stop those efforts, but they just don't have the votes. I mean, it comes down to the votes and being able to stop it based on the votes. You are right. Plenty of Republicans said that they would not move on they didn't want to move on a nominee in the last year of a president's term, let the voters decide, et cetera, et cetera. That includes Mitch McConnell, and Lindsey Graham very famously said it a couple times, and is now the head of the Judiciary Committee. So I think that it is likely. I don't want to predict anything because who knows what's going to happen, but I think it's certainly likely.
Yeah, I know this one really makes Democrats upset, but there's nothing. First of all, there's nothing in the Constitution that says that you cannot take up a nomination during an election year. But it also gives the Senate the power to do what they want, and it is their. They have the right to take up the nomination or not, and the bottom line is they didn't want to confirm a Democratic appointee. Now, of course, and they were looking for a rationale because no one wants to go out and say it. That's the reason they don't want to do that. But it is within their constitutional right. So what my guess is that the most likely scenario is, as Dan says, the president will announce an appointment very soon, probably tomorrow, and there'll be some talk about the issue. I think it's going to be one of two women. They're going to be talking to senators, and I think what the Republicans would like to do is have the vote after the election. And so not to put these Republicans that I mentioned just a little while ago on the spot and having to vote in a swing state, having to vote for a nominee that might turn off some swing voters, some centrist voters. But then I think if Biden is the winner, that actually gives the Republicans more reason to do it because they're worried about losing the filibuster, losing the court expanding and all those other things, and to lock this in for 25 years, I really don't see them not going forward with it.
The next question is, Dan, do you think the pandemic has affected political reporting negatively? Less access to politicians, less talking to voters? And I think it certainly has made it harder to cover this presidential election. I think that you have to get more creative, calling voters on the phone, finding different ways to connect with people who are undecided. I think it's obvious that it's made it more difficult. You aren't having, in 2016, I spent 300 days on the road, for example, covering Hillary Clinton's election. That's just not happening now. It's not safe, and our companies are trying to be very safe and making very intentional decisions about when to travel and what to cover. And there we cover everything, but in which way, in the way that we cover it. I was in Monroe, Michigan yesterday, so that, that people are traveling. We are traveling at certain times to do certain stories. But it's definitely made it more difficult. And I think that you get a lot from being on the ground in these places and talking to people and getting a sense of how things are going in these counties and these areas. So I do think that really matters. And I think that, a lot of people at CNN and all over the journalism spectrum understand that. So that's why you do see some people traveling and pursuing these stories. But it's very, very different than it would be in another presidential election. Just because it has to be. It's a safety issue.
So I'll try to take the next one about the news that Republicans threw out ballots in Wisconsin in the 2016 election. So I haven't, first of all, when it's referred to as Republicans, I don't know if there was a systematic effort or something, if that's what the charge is, but no, I don't think there's any evidence that Republicans in Wisconsin or any other states or Democrats, as we got a question earlier in California. It was a very close, race, and so there's always concerns about that. But remember, if there is a problematic county, or a precinct or a county, what both campaigns are trying to do is send poll monitors in. And you don't know which they're going to send them to try to deter that. And of course, it happened in any county. I don't why pick Wisconsin? Why pick that party? But no, I haven't seen anything to support that or any state.
I don't know that either. I don't really want to comment on it because I don't know the answer. The next question: do you think Trump's portrayal of Vice President Biden as Sleepy Joe will end up backfiring during the debates? I think it goes against every single president and presidential campaign in the past in which you want to play up your opponent's abilities on the debate stage and your opponent's abilities to spar. And obviously the president is a unique figure and he does things his own way, and it worked for him in 2016. But I do think you saw around the Democratic convention, for example, a lot of Republicans talked about Biden, not being with it and questioning his mental acuity and questioning his ability to give a speech. And then he comes out and gives a perfectly normal presidential acceptance speech. And the bar that they lowered was so low that if you're a voter and all you've been hearing about is, Joe Biden isn't with it, he doesn't have the mental acuity, et cetera, and then he comes out and gives a fine speech, it seems better in retrospect because of what your expectations were. So I do think it could end up backfiring, especially if the vice president has a good debate, not just a fine, like an okay debate. If he has a good debate, a lot of people are expecting him to be low energy and not great and all the things that President Trump says. So I do think there's a chance that gamesmanship, that pre-debate gamesmanship could come back to hurt the president.
I like the way he characterized his speech at the convention, normal. And it reminds me of the 1920 campaign with Warren G. Harding, the return to normalcy. And I think that's kind of where we are, that these few undecided voters, the reason they're undecided is because, politics just stinks to them. It's just, it's too chaotic, it's too mean. And so this sleepy kind of, it's actually not a bad thing. And why that I think it will backfire, I think he's kind of moved away from it. He was looking for a new nickname for it earlier in the summer, because it's just not really an effective one. But I
will
think,
say Trump's advisors have kind of acknowledged that Republicans shouldn't be lowering the bar. Jason Miller was talking to the Post at an event and said that, I'm telling my Republican friends, like, let's not lower the bar so much because, as I mentioned earlier, he has debated so many times and he has been in the public eye for so long. They're now trying to build them up a little bit. But I do think that question gets at something, which is the president's commentary and nicknames have stuck. And so in a lot of voters' minds, that's what they're expecting. Go ahead. You want to read the next one?
Erosion of democratic institutions. Yeah. So, it is disappointing that for example, like the U.S. Senate, or let's say Republicans in the Senate, really act more like Republicans than they do as defenders of the congressional institution. But I think that's sort of been happening on both sides, and so this partisanship, due to the extreme polarization that we have, it's something I think is kind of disappointing. I don't know if I want to say this, agree with the comment about the way they put it, kind of erosion of democratic institutions. Turnout people are more engaged than ever, and they're participating more. And I think we're going to have, it's possible we have a record number of people turning out to vote this time around, breaking what happened in 2008. Yeah, it is kind of troubling, and some of the comments that the president makes against the press, and in particular the press is kind of our watchdog on democracy and a watchdog on government, and him trying to really undercut that and the legitimacy of our elections as well. But I think, we survived a civil war. We survived a lot of really tough moments in American history. And I think we will. And so, I'm not quite as pessimistic, or I don't see it as dire as maybe the questioner.
So we have 4 more questions. We can do rapid fire if everyone's okay with that. What do you think has caused the narrowing of Biden's lead in the past month? I think it's just natural in these presidential campaigns. As the election gets closer, more people are deciding. There's going to be more people. The polls are going to narrow. I think you saw on that graph they haven't narrowed that much nationally. I think you're going to see it in some of these state polls where people are deciding. But I think it's pretty natural.
So I had nothing to do. I look at these polls every hour or so, and what I kind of noticed about them is Biden's it's narrow, but not because Biden has dropped, because Trump has risen a little bit. And I think the convention helped him marginally by about a point or two. Republicans that are been a little bit disappointed and worried, kind of coming back to him, but it still is only getting him to about 44%. And so I think so Biden is still in a pretty good position, and it's very possible that lead will grow. Dan, you're right. I mean, it may tighten a little bit. Some of those Republicans might be coming home. That might get him to 46%. But I think what we're seeing about people who don't like either candidate are leaning toward Biden. Independent voters in the last 4 or 5 election cycles in a row have voted for the out party each time. So the fewer people who really are independent and are undecided, the people who decided late last time voted for the challenger. I mean, it's very likely that that lead could also expand, or we're back to where we are. 52-47 could be a final result.
How high do you think voting rates will be this year? Do you think this will foster a long-term increase in voter engagement? I do think it'll be very high. I think people are voting from home. I think people are engaged. And I guess the hope for both parties is that it fosters a long-term increase. The divide between Democrats and Republicans continues to grow. What is the possibility we will see a rise in the rise of a stronger independent party? I think it's pretty narrow. The parties are pretty set in their ways, and it's hard for me to envision that, but anything is possible. Do you want to add anything?
No, you're right. That's we hope, or a lot of people hope every year, and it doesn't happen. Mark Kelly will be the next senator from Arizona, and it's a special election, so he'll be sworn in November.
Wow, that was definitive.
Yeah, I'll give you one definitive thing today.
Yeah, that for a political science professor, that's very definitive. I would say that he's in a very good position right now. And then, do you think there is a bias in the media that favors Biden? I do not, and that will be the
and I think it's actually the other way around. Is that Trump sort of the bias is toward ratings? Sorry, Dan, close your ears when I talk about this.
That's fine. I'll listen.
But that's really what it's about. They want a good story, and so here's what I think you're going to see. Trump makes good television and good news, so he gets more coverage that crowds out his opponent. And also with Trump being behind, it is in the interest of the news media to create the possibility, the scenario of a competitive race. Any good news for Trump is going to be, the race is tightening. They always talk about within the margin of error, and therefore, it could be a closer race as opposed to a wider Biden lead. Some of that is not because he's Donald Trump and they like him, but because he's the incumbent president. They want to compete. So we call this kind of a structural bias. It's not really a partisan type of bias.
The one thing I will say is that it's very popular to attack journalists in this moment in time, but as a journalist and as someone who knows a lot of journalists, that there are a lot of people who dedicate their lives to telling the stories of others, and they're absolutely doing their best without biases infecting their reporting.
If we have a repeat of Bush v. Gore, we'll have Trump will be reelected. That'll be my answer to that question.
And that's it.
And we'll either have a 9-0 opinion or we'll have a 6-3 opinion. That is, on partisan lines. So.
And Carmen's back.
Thank you very much, Dan and Jeff. And thank you to all of those who participated. And we hope you consider joining us later tonight for trivia and a beer tasting. Have a good night, guys.
Bye.
Thank you.